score, or we want to update the number of lives they have left. Update player lives text. A bit long, but it's okay. It's lives. And so we want to create a second component, as I said. So we have the score taken care of, but we also want to create another text component that I will just place right underneath. And maybe I can just duplicate this because that's a simple way of doing that. We can say lives left or just lives. We can move it slightly down and just to see, yeah, so it looks good. So now this time what I want to do is I'm going to create a private reference. So as you recall, I created a public player score object so that I could just drag into this. But when I make a private one, so if I make a private game object reference, which says player lives object, if I were to do this, and I'm supposed to have, naming convention is that I have an underscore in front for a private variable. So if I do this, I cannot just retrieve it, or I can't just have the reference by default. I need to do something for that. So what I can do is a couple of different things. One simple way is to essentially just find the exact object. So we can say game object dot find, and here we can just find the exact name of the object. And so I can say lives, and this would just get me any game object that exists, if it exists, with the name lives. You can also do a find by tag, and there's a couple of different approaches, but I'm just going to choose one where I'm going to look up the object name itself. And then I want to have, well, actually I just realized that's not player score text, it needs to be player lives. So we need to also access the actual text, right? So we want the player lives text because we need to update the text that is actually contained inside of that. So we want, first thing we want is we want the object, right? So we want the player object, and then we want the player lives text. And actually I want to rename these as well. Let's add an underscore to the front, again, just to keep the convention. And we want to do the same thing with this one. Okay, cool. So the next thing is we want the player's lives text, and we want to update this text. Actually, before we do that, we can just get the reference. So in reality, we don't actually even need the game object. We could just directly have said, we're just going to have the text component, and what I can do here is I can say, get me the object named lives, and then get me the component of that, which is the text component. So this is one way to do this. And then we would just replace this with this, and that's one simple way of doing it. If you wanted to kind of make it more clear what is happening, you can also have it this way, where we first find the game object, and then we say player object lives, or lives object dot get component text. So now we have the text, and then we can again specify the text at the start number of lives. And then we also need to have some way of taking the number of lives left and actually placing it here. So if you remember, we actually don't have this information in the script. We have it in a different script. So we actually need to get a reference to the spawn character. So private or public, either way you're fine. Private spawn character, but I would prefer to call it public just so we know it's very clearly that this is a script. So we can say here spawn character equals game object dot get component, or find object of type rather, and we want the spawn character type, and then we want to say plus, So number of lives plus the actual number of lives remaining, which is the spawn character dot number of lives. So now we can display the number of lives at the very start. And then when we update the number of the player lives, then the simplest way to do this is when we do update the player lives, we can basically say player lives text dot text is equal to, once again, number of lives plus lives. So now if we were to hit play, we can see that the score is 0 and the number of lives is 3. So if I were to jump off again, oh, okay, so the number of lives did not update. It's probably because I didn't call the function. Yeah, so I need to call the function. So I have the update player information script. So now what I need to do is I need to actually update the player lives text, and I want to give it the number of lives left. And now we should be good. Now we should be able to see an updated number of lives remaining. Okay. So let's see. I have 1 score and 2 lives left. I'm not sure if I showed. Oops. Okay. I'm not sure if I showed what happened when there are no lives left, but let's have a look. Oops. Okay. So now the game has paused, and the way that you can know that is that the position of my, let's see, the position of my game object. So let's find the character. The position of the game object is no longer changing, right? So we know that the game is paused because that's how we pause the game, is that we set the time scale to 0. So the no physics updates are going to take place. So yeah, we know that the game is paused. Now the last thing, or the game is ended rather, and it's paused. So one other thing we can also do is we can probably add in that text. So if we want to show the player that the game is ended, we want to have a piece of text that will be shown when the game ends. Right. Okay. And in this case, we don't need to update the text, so we can just say game over or something like that. And what we can do is the following. So we don't want to display this text all the time. So there's kind of a couple of different things you can do. One thing you can do is that you can set this object to be inactive and only activate it when the player loses all their lives. And then you can display this text. So instead of hiding it, you unhide it. The other approach is that you just, you have no text, so the text is empty. And then when the game ends, you basically do the same thing as this, where you add the text that says game is over. I want to show you how we can do the other approach, because I've already shown you the text approach. So just quickly, we want to also have this game object, which is public. Let's do public again, just for simplicity. Game over text, right? And so we can go to our game UI and we can add this back in. Oops, it's this one. And so we already have access to the game over text object. So the first thing we can do is we can basically hide it, right? So we can say game over text dot set active, and we can set it to false, which would mean that the object at the very start of the level will not be visible. And we can just have a look to see that it actually works. So as you can see, when we start the game over text does not appear anywhere. But now let's say that I don't have any lives left. What I can do is I can essentially say, I can create another method here, which is display game over. And what we would do is that we would say game over text dot set active true. And we can call this function from our other script where we say that the game has ended. So we need to get the update player information script, and we want to say over text, display game over. And now we are telling the game, or we're telling the script to call this function, which would enable the game over text when the game is actually over. So let's see that this is working. 2 lives left. 1 life. So here you can see that the game over text is now displayed in front of in the middle of the game rather.